Welcome to Big Blend Radio, where we celebrate variety and how it adds spice to quality of life. Every second Wednesday, we team up with Books Forward, who we've been working with for years. They're celebrating 25 years this year, and we do our second Wednesday Books and Authors show. And today we have Marty Neumeier joining us. He is all about creativity, writing, branding, design. I think, I love what he does because creativity is like everything to me personally. I just think it's everything, and it can solve problems. It can keep you entertained. And in these days, we need entertainment, and he's got the book for it. You can go to martyneumeier.com, and that's Neumeier. Marty, did I pronounce this right? I didn't even ask you. I
Yes,
always give it
it's
good
Neumeier,
enough.
Marty Neumeier.
Neumeier?
Yeah.
Got to make
So
sure.
Neumeier.com, martyneumeier.com is my author website for my nonfiction.
Yeah.
And for fiction, for Octavo, it's a Substack. So Marty Neumeier .substack.com, or just look up the Scarlet Files on Substack.
Yeah, now the book is Octavo, but if you go to Substack, you can read and get actually the audio version of this, and then October, it all comes out as one piece. Have I got that right?
That's right. The whole set, the whole suite of products.
Right. Well, this is exciting because it's different. Again, you're being creative, right? It's
Yeah,
like, hey, this
yeah.
is the way the industry works, and the industry is not exactly perfect right now, is it? And so let's do something different.
Yep, I'm all about different. So, and different doesn't always work. So it's going to be a really interesting experiment to see if I'm able to sort of reinvent the publishing industry along my own, with my own vision.
Yeah, so Substack, it's really growing. It's a lot of people aren't even getting email newsletters anymore. They're doing it all through
Yeah,
Substack,
yeah,
which is
it's
interesting.
exploding this year. Yeah, everyone
Yeah.
who is in mainstream, mainstream media seems to be jumping in. So they bring a huge audience with them,
Hmm.
and they're able to do their work the way they want to do it. So it's high quality. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, we need it for journalism, especially, I think,
yes,
for
and that's
independent journalists. Yeah, that's
a
the main
lot of
thing.
journalists moving in there straight into Substack, and they're doing really well, beautifully. So I don't usually even read the New York Times anymore because I'm too busy reading my favorite columnists and news reporters on Substack.
Wow, it's really changed. I mean, when we started this magazine, it was 28 years ago. It was in print and it was pre-Google. And we even had a section at the back of the magazine called the Webifieds because people were having business cards and they'd paid like thousands for a website. And how could you find it? How could you get your website promoted in those Netscape books? So we'd had the Webifieds and we'd like try to teach people like you've paid for a website, you should at least promote the website name. So that's what we did. And now look at where we are. It's amazing,
It is amazing.
how in the last, 3 decades, how everything's changed. And what you're doing is like, hey, let's use this tool in this way. And it grows from there, which is fantastic.
Mm.
Let's tell everyone about the book and the story because this is unique. Let's kind of, I'm reading it right now and it is super fast paced and exciting. And the two characters, Scarlett and Artie, are hysterical. I love them. I love it sounds like my mom and I who work together, Nancy and I, kind of sounds like that in a little, we love each other, but we know how to poke each other's buttons,
Yeah, a little
you
bit of
know?
bickering
Yeah.
once in a
Oh,
while.
yeah. Oh, yeah. But
Yeah,
we have
so
wine at night to calm the bickering
oh,
down.
that's good. Yeah. Well, Scarlett and Artie are really oil and water. Scarlett's young and brash and recent graduate, and she's a scientist, and Artie's an art historian. And she's very proper. She's a proper British woman and very highly educated, with really good manners. And so the two of them, they have to work it out. Let's just say.
Over a common bond with this manuscript. So let's talk about how they met. Kind of give everyone the beginning, but don't give it away, right? Obviously, you know how to do
Right.
that, and
Well,
leave
I'll give you
everybody
the
alone chapter
I'll
by
give you the
chapter,
setup.
right?
I'll give everyone the
Yeah.
setup. Okay, so Scarlett and Artie are both engaged in um, uh, verifying art. Basically, one is an art historian, one is a scientist who uses science to determine the dates and the the painters or the creative people that did whatever work that they're
What
vetting.
egg is being used in the paint?
What kind of egg tempera?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're thrown together in a townhouse in northern Italy by their client, who's a wealthy art collector. He's a technologist, but he's wealthy, and he's basically trying to buy the Renaissance. He's got everything, and when he buys whatever he buys, he sticks in a giant vault so no one else can see it except for him. And so they're thrown together, and they're supposed to take a look at some paintings, especially one, and determine if it's valuable. And they, after working on it a few days, they figure it out. It's a painting painted by Leonardo da Vinci's last pupil,
Mm.
of an older man, very well dressed older man, a full length portrait. And then they figure out this is Leonardo himself, as painted by his pupil, who was 15 at the time. So they're pretty
And
excited
this
about that.
pupil's a real person. This is a real deal.
Yes. Most of the book is based
He did
on.
this artwork
Yeah.
behind me.
Okay, that looks
Yeah.
almost like where he was raised in
Yeah.
Vaprio, but he's actually a count, a young count, but he's a very nice young man, very educated, properly educated, unlike Leonardo, who had a very sketchy education, figured out everything on his own. So they figure out that this is Leonardo, and they make a report on it. And while they're looking through the rest of the materials that were found under the floorboards of this townhouse, they find an old portfolio, like leather portfolio. It's all cracked and everything. And they see that it's been opened before, but they very carefully open it and they look inside, and it's blank paper. It's just a lot of blank paper. Looks like from the Renaissance. It's that old.
Wow.
And Scarlett is paging through these, and she gets about halfway through, and there's a letter. She goes a little bit further, and there's a manuscript. Artie happens to be a pretty good linguist. She's fluent in the Romance languages. And she reads it, and she recognizes it as an old version of Italian, Milanese Italian. And she's able to translate it, and they take it back to their hotel room, start reading it, and they went, oh my God, this is an actual account of Melzi, who's the pupil, and Leonardo, as they took a trip to Venice to get Leonardo's notebooks, his famous notebooks, published, which they never were. But his life's goal was to get those published.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're on their way there. And when they get to Venice, they find instead of a calm print shop, they find a murder scene. And the police close it down, and they will not reopen it until they can solve the murder. But they're much more busy with bigger issues. So that could just sit there forever, and it'll put the printer out of business. And that's the printer that Leonardo wants to use for his books. They're friends, and he won't work with anybody else. So the two women see that, and they go, geez, we cannot let this manuscript fall into the hands of our client, because he'll just bury it.
Yeah, put it back in the vault.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the world once again will be deprived of Leonardo's genius, because when Leonardo did not publish his notebooks, his example was lost for 200 years until they all started to come out. And people realized that what he had done, and it was too late, because art went one way, science went another, and now, today, we need them back together. We need them to talk to each other.
I love this. And you as a creative person, this is like, Leonardo's got to be like a hero for you.
He
right?
is, yeah. He's to me. I started out as a graphic designer, but now I'm just a designer of anything. And to me, he's the poster boy for design. So he mixed art and practicality, art and science, to make something, a third thing, which we now call design.
Right.
So yeah, but and he was doing it at a super high level, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can all learn lessons from him. However, we don't have any information about what he thought about things. All we have is his notebooks, which are instructions to himself about what to try next or what he observed. You know, they're very kind of scientific in a way. They don't tell us how he thought, how he felt,
Mm-hmm.
anything about his friends. All that stuff is
Yeah.
just, we hear little bits and pieces and that's it. So I had to do a lot of research to figure it out. But I feel like as a designer, I come to this project with some intuitive understanding of what he was doing because in my way, I did the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to be original. I got a bunch of employees around me to help me. I ran a studio. I had to rent studios and keep them up, make a profit, all the stuff that Leonardo had to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have a sense of like what this cost him to do what he did because he was, even though he didn't finish a lot of things, he was working constantly and just inventing like crazy. I mean, he was on fire. So that intrigues me, and so that's the background for the mystery
Right.
that has to be solved, and also the thriller that wraps around that mystery of the two women doing what they think is
I
right.
love that. I love the women in there, and I love the fact too, getting into the history of Leonardo, and now I have to ask this: did that mystery occur? That murder actually occur, or is
No,
that
that's
part
about the
that's
only
complete?
thing that's the only thing that didn't occur.
Okay, I'm
Okay,
just making
so
sure
so the
because
history,
yeah.
the surrounding circumstances are as true as I can make them to the known history.
Yeah.
And so I think if you're a Leonardo historian, you'd read it and you'd be nodding the whole time, going,
Mm.
"Oh yeah, that's what happened. Yeah, that's exactly right." And then you'd be
But
thinking, "I didn't
yeah.
know that happened," and that's probably me making up stuff. So
But it's kind of but that makes you curious. And why not? And how do we know, right? We don't know those little in between things that could have.
they could have happened. Yes. So I have him inventing a microscope, which happened 100 years later
Mm,
in history, but it would be something very simple for him to do. I mean, he knew how to grind
mm,
lenses. He did a lot of this sort of work. So I have him do that just as another
mm.
invention that he creates in an afternoon. That's
Do
nothing
you
for
think
him.
he watched nature and was inspired by nature because of the
Yeah.
scientific background? I mean, when we look at design and we look at like even, we want to fly, right? And he was into flight, that you're looking at nature. I mean, the bird is
Mm,
going to be the obvious inspiration. Butterflies, dragonflies to me are like little fighter pilots, and
it's true.
they do eat each other and do crazy weird things, but I won't get into that. But do you think he was inspired by nature and what
Oh,
was
it was
going
all
on
from
that way?
nature. Nature
Hmm.
was his. He did a lot of religious paintings because that's where the money is. And so one thing I understand about
Oh,
design is you have two ways, two things
yes.
you have to do. You have your
The custom commission versus
yeah, the things you want to do because you would think the
yeah.
world needs them, and then things you have to do to keep the doors open, right? And so
Mm,
paintings were part of the keeping the doors open, but he also learned a lot from painting because he was talking with the painting as he called it his discorso mentale. This is
mm,
the mental discourse with the painting is really what he loved. Finishing the painting meant nothing to him. It was what he's learning as the painting is talking back to him. He puts a stroke and he sees what happens. He tries
mm.
something else, and there's this discussion going on. Same thing with everything he was doing. But my sense of what he did for money, his bread and butter, is that it's none of those things that we've seen in his notebooks.
Mm.
It's
There's
the
the
paintings,
religious
of
paintings.
course, because he's getting commissions, but it's also what I'm calling spectacles. So he worked for the Duke of Milan, and a lot of the work he did for royalty was putting on spectacles for parties to impress the other royals
Mm.
that would come to visit. So they'd be amazing, like, amazing theatrical performances, which he didn't keep any records of because to him that was just bread and butter. It was just what he had to do, so that he had time to think about flying machines and what makes water swirl and how fish bones got to the top of mountains.
It's so fascinating because I think any of us in this industry, in creativity in any form, right? It's always that it's like a pain in the butt. It's like using one side of the brain and the other and trying to have a meet. It's like you go out and see clients and then you have to come back and create and you're like, they wore me out.
Yeah.
Does
Yes.
that make, we
Clients.
call it the indoor outdoor thing, right? The indoor,
Yeah.
we want to sit and create and do our thing. But if you don't go out and do the other side, the business side, you ain't going to be able to do this. But it's
Yeah.
like
You
when
have
you
to pay
do
the rent.
that, you're
Yeah.
splitting yourself when you do
Right.
it. But there are, like, if I ever said, okay, I would never do that other side, it would suck because I learned so much from the other side. And I see, like I remember when we were in print going, I was like, driving around doing cold calls, selling ads on paper, but I would be able to go in the back door of the restaurants and see what was going on with the chefs, what they were creating, and you don't get that back
Yeah.
door
You're
stuff. And
engaged
I
with
got the
real,
scandal.
real life.
I got the
And
scandal. Yeah, the town
yeah,
scandal.
yeah. Well, I think that's part of being a designer is you've got a foot in each world. You're trying to invent and be original, but at the same time, you have to satisfy clients and you have to satisfy their customers. And that all teaches you something, right? And you learn about the world and it makes your more original work better. It makes
Yeah.
it gives it something solid to stand on. So he was doing that. I mean, he was engaged with a lot of very powerful people at the time. They loved him,
Yeah.
by the way. He wasn't one of these starving artists. He was like, he dressed really well. He was charming. He could play the lyre.
Mm.
He was the life of a party, but humble at the same time. Just the sweetest guy you'd ever want to meet. And that sort of flies in the face of what we think about artists. And Michelangelo is the opposite from all
Okay.
reports. But so there's some things to learn from Leonardo about diplomacy
Mm.
and so forth. And he was very good
Oh,
at all that kind of stuff. So he's, just, and I think
diplomacy.
he's a man for our times. I think he
Mm.
got sort of put in a separate bucket because when people found out he was gay, that
Mm.
kind of went, oh, okay, I don't know if I want to,
Oh,
I don't want to
really?
make him a hero. This is, years ago, but he's like, I don't know, 6 or 7 things that are just not popular. Like
Mm.
he's gay, he's left-handed, he's dyslexic,
He's
he's
brilliant.
a vegetarian when no one was a vegetarian. So
Yeah, really.
a
But
lot of the things he would fit right in today is what I'm saying.
yeah, in a lot of things, and we can learn diplomacy. I think the way the world is getting so,
Yeah,
caustic,
yeah,
that diplomacy goes a long way. And diplomacy means that, you have that humility and he's humble, like you're saying, because you have to be able to step in other shoes to be able to create from a
right.
different perspective. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So getting
So,
back to your question of
yeah.
did nature inspire him? That was nature was his God, basically.
Hmm.
He was an atheist. That's the other thing that probably would have alienated him, a lot of people towards him at
And
the
he's
time.
doing all these religious paintings,
Yeah.
probably
But
going,
because
here's a nice
he
fairy
liked the
tale.
stories and
Yeah,
he
that's
liked
it.
making money. And, so he was practical in that
Mm.
sense. He also got involved in making the Machinery of War with Cesare Borgia, which he regretted later in his life,
Obviously, yeah.
he regretted a lot of things. But his attitude was, look, you have to earn virtue. It's something you have to be able to pay for
Mm.
your own virtue. And if you don't have enough money, you have to do whatever you have to do. But as soon as you're able, you should just start working for the good of everybody, the good of nature. So he grew up in nature. He didn't go to school. He learned everything by drawing and observing nature and tried to figure it all out for himself. So
Mm.
he didn't know how to speak Latin, which was kind of not so good in those days because if you're an educated person, that's the first thing you need to do
Yeah.
is speak Latin. He didn't know any math. He had to figure math out by himself, which he did by drawing triangles and sticking them together and so forth. And so he eventually became really good friends with Fra Luca Pacioli, who was considered the father of accounting, seemed like a real fun guy, and even though he's an accountant, and so
We need
they
fun
were good friends,
accountants.
and
Yeah, yeah.
they did a book together and on
Wow.
math, and so I mean he learned a lot, and he loved books. He just was dyslexic and obviously
Mhm.
didn't know how to read Latin, so these were drawbacks, but he overcame them.
That's amazing. And you think that's a lesson in itself to just keep going and then to collaborate, as well as to have that humility to be able to collaborate. And maybe through him coming at a different angle, it's helping all these other people learn something that they're having a challenge with, you know?
Right. Well, his complaint with people who are educated was that their knowledge is secondhand. Like they didn't invent any of these things; they're just copying and repeating what other brilliant people have said. And yes, they're very learned, but they're not. They
Applying.
don't go to the source of
Yeah.
information. And he said the source is nature. You have to look at nature if you want to have some original ideas. There's so much to learn, and people would just rather look at a book, which he was practical about. He says, I want to put my work in books so people can read
Mm-hmm.
them because I have a lot to say and I hope to have an effect on the world.
Mm.
So that was the tragedy of his life, is that he never published those books. And we don't think
Mm.
about that now because we see them all the time, you know, that in it,
Mm-hmm.
go online and look up Leonardo and you'll see all his drawings and everything. But it took 200 years. Um,
What led you? I know obviously who he is and all that he has done, and I love the art and science together because they are together. There is no split to me at all. Even if you look at
for him,
color,
they aren't.
the
No,
science
no.
they're all the science of color go hand in hand. I mean, there's just so much
Yeah.
in all
Yes.
of it's connected, you know. Um, when I know obviously he's a huge impact on your life, but
Mm.
where did the idea of the murder and hey, I'm going to write this novel, you know, because this is your debut fiction, and obviously you know how to tell stories. Because number one, the book, I feel like we're in a movie, and I can like hear the voices, like I can, and you know, I know on Substack now you've got the audio. We'll get into that in a second, but you've I could see this as like totally a movie, like just really fast paced and going for it. But what led you to say, "Hey, I'm going to go jump the nonfiction to the fiction ship"?
um, I think it was when I was doing research for my book, one of my deeper books called Meta Skills, about how we're going to survive AI. And so this is
Oh
about
God, help
uh,
us!
12 years ago when I wrote it. It was a bit ahead of its time. But while I was researching it, I was reading about Leonardo because I wanted to put something in there about him. And I read a book by Fritjof, I don't know how to pronounce his name, Capra, who's a science writer. And he was telling the story of the scientific side of Leonardo because he's a scientist. So you
Mm,
hear all about the art part all the time. To me, that's the least interesting part of what he was doing, except
mm,
for the science behind the art, which was
mm,
where his thinking was, right? So anyway, Fritjof says he tells the story about Leonardo wanting to publish his notebooks, running out of time because he was always distracted by the latest problem. He would much rather work on a new problem than record his old thoughts.
mm.
So and so that kind of got him in trouble, and his notebooks were just piled up everywhere. And as he started to get older, he realized he wasn't going to live long enough to get these published. And if my story is correct, which is totally made up, but if it were, that would explain why he never got them published. He got,
Oh yeah,
thrown off track by this murder that
murder.
happened at the print shop. But in reality, he didn't get it finished, and he gave it to his young pupil, who was probably about 18 at the time. Said, "You got a cover for me. You have to get this out there into the world." And he promised that he would, but it turned out to be way over his head. The amount of work, just sorting through all the notebooks. There were twice as many as we know about, at least. So
Wow.
at the time, he had them all, and he just didn't even know where to start. And he grew old, and his son was stuck with all these notebooks piled up in the attic, and was so sick of hearing about the great man Leonardo that he just gave them to friends or anybody who stopped by. He'd say, "Take whatever you want."
Oh my gosh.
Some people just lose them, or they get lost, or lost in a flood or whatever. And other people were collectors, but they just kept them to themselves as curiosities because they didn't really understand what he was doing or where he fit in history. So
Wow.
200 years of that. And I read that. It was probably just one short chapter in this book, and I just got overcome with the most enormous wave of sadness hit me. And I was
Mm.
just like, that is the saddest thing I have ever heard. And so
Yeah.
I have to write that. I have to write that, take that little chapter and make that like a fiction story. And then also make my best guess at what Leonardo was like, how he sounded, how he would have behaved. based on
Mhm.
the little that we know.
Man, that's exciting when you think about, kind of putting him back in the spotlight, so because I think sometimes we go, oh yeah, Da Vinci. Oh yeah, yeah. Just
Yeah, flying
and
machines,
not,
paintings, Mona
yeah,
Lisa.
just kind of move on. And you hear about him in school, you learn that, and then you move on and not
Yeah,
really delve into what a mastermind he was, which was incredible what he did. I
yeah.
did I did an interview about the history of wine and really discovering who has the oldest vineyard, and I believe it was him. I might be getting my facts up in the
The oldest
twist.
vineyard, he had a vineyard.
Very old. Turned out his was, and one, it was him versus one in Jordan or Lebanon that were that old. Um,
I'm surprised because I've heard that, yeah, Middle East had the oldest,
mm.
you know,
But he was like
wineries,
right up there, I
vineyards.
think. And I was like, and I might be getting twirled around, but hey, why not? It sounds good to me. But
Yeah.
but
Well,
this
he
is
made some
exciting.
a pretty good bottle of white wine, I think.
Hey, why not? Let's go a little further too with what you're doing with the book. So it's going to come out as a normal book and an audio book. A normal book. What is that anymore?
Print book, yeah,
A
a hardcover,
printed,
yes,
an
yeah,
ebook, and then audio book, and that will be in October, right?
right. The ebook is going to be interactive, so that
Mm.
you've got the story like a normal ebook, but there'll be highlighted words, phrases, so forth. And if you click on those, it'll take you to another part of the book where there's behind the scenes, a little bit of
Okay.
history that I didn't talk about, or some photos from my research, or
Oh,
any,
cool.
but and a lot of that I'm also putting on Substack behind the scenes, behind
Okay.
the paywall. So
Mm.
for people who are really into Leonardo and the book, they can pay a little and get back there, and every week get a little bit more about the book. A lot of those
That's
things will
cool.
go into the ebook.
Mm.
The audiobook is, I wouldn't say it's unique anymore, but at the time that I conceived it, which is about 5 years ago, I think it would have been unique. It just took me this long to get it published. So it is a full cast audio. So it's every character is speaking their parts.
That's
And
cool.
purportedly, this is the recordings that they made while they were going through their adventure. So Scarlett and Artie turn in their reporting on the book as they're translating and vetting the story. They're sending it to the publisher
Mm.
by voicemails because Scarlett has trouble writing. She has dysgraphia, which is like
Mm.
dyslexia, except it
Mm.
makes it hard for you to write. She just
Mm.
rather record things on a phone. So they both record their files, send them to the publisher, and he emails back with a few words of
I
advice
love
or
I think it's hysterical. I love that because, well, because it's just so you get right into who they are as characters, with that part, the very
yeah.
beginning of the
And I
book
think
said.
when you hear them talking, it helps
Mm.
understand more of who they are, the two
Do you
women.
see this as a movie?
I saw it as everything at once. So I was going to say that next is the audiobook um, was the core of this project. So not
Okay.
it's usually the print book, right?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
write a print book and somebody reads it, or maybe a couple characters
So you're
read
doing
it.
a play.
And so
Yeah.
I created the story so that it would lend itself to an audiobook. So these files that they're the actual files of what they're discovering as they're discovering it are what you hear on the audiobook. And then you also hear the editor reading his emails. They're very short
Oh,
though. So,
that's cool.
and then Artie is the one who's telling the story, is translating the manuscript that Melzi wrote, and she after a while her voice blends. It just moves right into the Melzi's voice. So the kid is speaking it with an
Yeah.
Italian accent. He's
That's
telling the
cool.
story. So that is so I led with the audiobook, and then knowing that approach would make a very interesting print book because it's going to be the
Yeah.
transcript of all the audio, which makes it a very different sort of print book. And then the ebook is just using the information from behind the scenes to make it more lively and give it more context. So there's that. And then there's another book that's a limited edition book. It just got finished, just got it back. It's a beautifully bound book. Cost me $40 to print and bind these things each.
Wow.
So obviously that cannot be for sale in a bookstore, but I'm giving those to people who are my founding members on Substack. So anybody who signs up as a founding member gets one of these before anybody else gets their book, and it'll
Oh,
be
that's
signed and
cool.
numbered. There's 400, and that's all there's going to be.
See, that
So
that goes into the art world right there.
yeah, so the art world will be very happy with that book. It's got an exoskeletal spine, which means the covers are on the outside of the
Hmm.
spine, not on the inside, hidden.
That's cool.
So
That's
you,
cool.
it's really interesting. It's got a decal edge. It's just really it's a premium thing just for my core supporters. So there's 4 products right there,
Mm.
and then later I could come out with a paperback if I
Mm.
want. And that's pretty much it. I mean, there's possibility of a graphic novel, and there's certainly a possibility of a
Ooh.
TV series. And so that's
Yeah.
all part of my thinking when I wrote it. I'm seeing it as all those at once.
Hmm.
But I'm just one person, and I have to release the pieces one at a time. And so that's where Substack comes in, is I get a chance to one more time expose the book to my core readers, the people who really are perfect for this book, and get one more layer of feedback, because I've already done that twice. I've
Hmm.
had 2 groups of pre-readers read through the
Hmm.
book, and I got a lot out of that. It was so great to hear everybody's comments as I was writing and have a
That's
chance to
cool.
like improve some things. So the ending changed. Artie's character became much more vibrant, and I'm so grateful for that. The people who said that they would really wanted to see her be a rounder person instead of just Scarlet,
Yeah.
and that just worked out beautifully. So I'm doing a lot of things differently, and one of them is releasing it for free on Substack as a streaming product. And so that gives just more time for a group of supporters to find out about it and so forth, and also for me to
I love it.
test.
I love it. It's like I love Jack White, the musician,
Oh, yeah.
because I
White
just
Stripes. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, he's because look at what he did even with the White Stripes, right? It just
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, he just said, we're going to throw out Slickness. It's just going to be the 2 of us. And
and
my sister here doesn't play
yeah,
drums, and that's perfect. And be sure you don't get too good at that, because I'm gonna be hard on you. So
I
it's like,
it's but I mean he's a designer too. I mean he's
yeah,
an upholsterer and he's designing baseball bats now, going back into the print of printing vinyl. To me, it's like kind of
yeah,
and when he goes to shows, he makes everyone put their cell phones, like they take them away, like enough of that, and he
yeah.
feeds off his audience of what his set list is going to be, which I
That's
think is
beautiful.
really cool. Kind of like what you're doing as well as like this kind of like a this creative, like use what you have and use it, you know,
Yeah,
push it to the extreme of where you can, because he does it where goes to a show and he has designers from there stick to some kind of theme, like when he did his, I think it was Blue Tour, and an album come out, suddenly he just has an album, or he just shows up and does a pop-up thing, but some designer is
yeah,
there doing some poster and he has them like maybe 50 printed or something just for that show,
yeah,
that he did as a
yeah.
pop-up. Isn't it
He's
cool
a
that we can do
Yeah.
these
I
kinds of
love
things
that,
now?
and that's the kind of thing that AI can't duplicate. And so I think
Exactly.
what happened to just like science and art went 2 different ways. What's happening now
Mhm.
is authors are going in 2 directions. Some are going, and all creative people are, some are
Mhm.
going into super creative, um, um, sort of a genre busting work, and the others are just doing a lot of entertainment and trying to put out as much of it as they can. Well, those people are the most vulnerable to AI, because machine can do that kind of work.
Yeah.
If it can't now, it will very soon. And so you could just pump out a lot of that entertaining stuff that's derivative really easily. So that leaves the real artist free to do what they want. And I don't think that the real artists are going to make a ton of money, and I don't think they ever have.
Mm-mm. I think,
But
yeah,
they have something that's better than money.
there's a satisfaction of it's an integrity. I mean, real art has integrity.
Yeah,
I just, yeah, yeah. I just saw a poster, life. art is 100% real, politics are 100% real. And I thought, my God, but that's the two things that balance each other out. If you have
Well,
politics and
yes,
no art,
we have
we're
some
we're in a
we
mess.
have some feeble politics going on now. Some very
Yeah,
weak politics and a lot of
but the arts
greed
are,
happening. So art is the bulwark against that.
it's
So
our
artists are the
salvation.
most
Yeah.
likely people to stand up to that. And we have a lot to lose as artists because
Hmm.
if the thing we
Opening your
love,
mouth.
if nobody
Yeah.
wants the thing that we do, that's going to be a
Mm.
disaster for everybody, including us. So
Mm.
yeah, so I think that's where Substack is starting to shine. I think if a new world is going to emerge, it's going to start on Substack.
You- but okay, so a lot of us thought that kind of like, okay, MySpace to Twitter or whatever, X or whatever it is now, another AI. I don't, whatever, sell your company to your own company, fine, whatever
Yeah,
you want to do. So everything's, it's like, oh, this is the newest, greatest thing, and it could go away. Do you fear that with Substack that it could turn around? I
I
mean, I,
do. It
yeah,
could.
that's
It could actually go south because it's owned by people. And it's right. It's owned by people. People are flawed, but right now it's the right thing. I don't think any of the other media, social media, did anything that good. I mean, I never thought
no,
Twitter was
no.
going to save the world. I never thought Medium was going to save the world. But Substack is different because the creative people own their own audiences, just like they did
Hmm.
with newsletters. But I think the magic is that they're in a sort of a big tribe with people who support each other
Hmm.
and are trying to do really good work. They're
Yeah.
not. There's not enough money to make it all about money. There's just not.
Yeah, I
But
agree.
there's enough
Yeah.
power in it to change the direction of history. So I think you got a lot of smart people sharing ideas very directly, which they really didn't do before. The sort of like all the voices were separate from each other and they were all in different places. So right now, this year anyway, we got a lot of really smart people exchanging ideas. And I expect that to go for a few years before, if anything happens to it, it won't happen in the next couple of years. It'll be
Mhm.
after it becomes very successful. So,
Yeah.
artists are always moving. Like whenever I rented a studio for my business, I had
Mm.
to rent it in some place that was sort of dodgy, where I could afford the rent, because the money isn't that good in
Yeah.
design. And then because of that, and because of not doing a nice job on the studio, a couple other people would move in. Then the restaurants, and then maybe a gallery, and pretty soon that neighborhood would do better, and then I would be kicked out because the landlord could raise the
Yeah.
rent.
And it's
So
all
then
your
I'd have to
fault.
go look for another dodgy area. And
Yeah.
so that's how I know where I know the kind of where Leonardo had his studio. History doesn't know where it is, but I
God,
went
we
there
had
and I looked around and I said, it was here. I know it was on this corner.
we when Nancy had her magazine in South Africa, eventually ended up in her house because she bought a
Mm,
old, it was a dentist place, and he had an office on the property, little rooms. So it was like perfect little offices, right?
yeah,
And then
yeah.
house, but it was separate because I mean, even now we work like in stupid hours, But she at one point, because everyone's like, you have to have an office. And she's like, I don't want people walking in. And we did do an
Mm.
office in this country when we lived in San Diego. And then people would come in and start drinking coffee. And we're like, get out. We're busy, we were not, unless we were a little
Yeah.
mountain town, and we're like, just, and we shared the office with a candle maker when I think back to that. And then the two of, like, people would come by after the bar closed and go, Nancy and Lisa always have wine, and we're like,
Yeah.
get out
You're
again.
like the backup,
Yeah, the backup wine people in the
seller.
town.
Yeah.
But she rented the upstairs of a plastics factory. The guy was a client, and he made toys. He was from Germany and his wife was Dutch. And boy, when they fought, that was like epic. World War II. That was fun to watch because
Mm,
they were whoo. But
wow.
and all of us would stand up at the top looking down when they, just, and then we're like, things could fly. But we were upstairs in the office, and it was like, I think she had the first Mac computer that you could print out film. And we had our own clothesline for film for our magazine. And then we took it. to the printer, and the printer's going like, this isn't how we do it. And then one time she brought it on a disc and they're like, what's that? So we went through this weird, like if you had a computer problem, someone had to fly from Johannesburg to Port Elizabeth to help you while we're sitting at the top of a plastics factory in the industrial park. It was really, but
Yeah,
creativity comes out of that stuff, I believe.
it does. I remember one of my offices, I couldn't find any. I got kicked out because of the neighborhood got better, and I had to move to another one. And I ended up in a former mortuary because no one would rent it. They were superstitious about it. So I said, I'll do it,
Oh my gosh.
and I was the only person in the whole building. So we had a nice studio overlooking the street with, light coming in and everything. But the rest of the mortuary was still intact. They hadn't sold it or removed all the stuff. So they had the room where they drained the bodies and sort of lab
Oh
like
my
room.
God, this
And
is
we used to go
fantastic.
down there to get ideas.
Oh my God. But
But because the whole place was open to us because no one was renting. So that's the kind
that's
of
so fun.
thing you get
You,
to do if you're
well,
a
Nancy
person.
had a typesetting section of the business because now she's got this massive computer, right? That nobody
Mm,
really knew how to work. But we had typesetting and we worked with a printer who was hyper. And on Fridays, she had her own like everybody came to the office. Like everybody came for a cocktail hour on Fridays. All the clients, people we worked with, the printer. We had a car guy who would sell cars to people. It was crazy. We had our own chamber of commerce meeting, basically. But one of our clients was the mortuary, and we did all the funeral notices and all the that's talk about the bread and butter. Like it
yeah,
helped fund the magazine, which was the fun stuff. But
right.
that was all the more, and
Yeah,
they would
it's your
come
bread
over
and butter.
and their hands, they would shake hands, and it was like limp, and they would go, "It's raining. We're gonna get busy."
Oh my
Stuff like
God.
that. And they were like, "We're in the
So how
dead
would you
center
ever
of
know that?
town."
Yeah, that's like insider knowledge.
I mean, it was just they. I mean,
People die when it
they're
rains.
they have exactly whenever, and if it's there's a drought, they're like, "It's not good enough."
Uh,
It
business is suffering.
I know. Wow, wow, wow. Well, it has been so much fun to chat with you. Fun reading your book, and everyone again, Substack, go check it out. The book is Octavo and by Marty Neumeier. So you can go to martyneumeier.com. Link is in the episode notes also to the Substack. So Marty Neumeier again on Substack. You can
Yeah,
get,
do the
connected
Substack.
there.
You won't find the book on my author site for the business books. It's a separate
Yeah.
line of books, but Substack is the place to go, and you will be kept up to date. And you can go behind the scenes if you want, but you can read the book and listen to it for free.
That's cool. And then when it comes out in October, everyone can get the whole ball of wax. But then
Yep.
you're not there 100% yet with the whole ball of wax until like Netflix, right?
Right. Well, yes. I mean,
Apple,
cross our fingers there, but
Amazon, you know.
yeah, yeah,
I mean, if Amazon's going to sell the book,
yeah,
then they should do the series.
yeah. They should. I'm holding out for Apple because I think they're doing the best work right now.
And
Um,
besides, that was the first big Epic computer we had. So that's
yeah,
important.
and they were my first big client
Oh,
as
there
a
you go.
designer.
See,
Yeah.
see, that's awesome. Awesome. Well, so much fun. Thank you so much.
You too, Lisa. Thank you so much for having me.
It's been fun. And everyone, again, booksforward.com. Got to give them a shout out too.
Yes, my publicity firm. They're
They're
great
awesome.
people. I'm going to go to New Orleans and meet them as soon as I can because we
Ah,
haven't met in person yet. So,
we haven't either. And we've been working with them since for the 25 years. Julie Shirky, and
mm,
the founder, and do a lot with Ella, a lot with all of them. And
yeah,
I have to say, they really bring in the best authors that have and people with a conscience who really care about their craft. It's like there's not a bad book or a negative experience in 25 years. How about that?
that is amazing. Well,
Yeah,
I've just loved them. I love them from the first meeting we had. I also want to give a
awesome.
shout out to the audio producers called Post Hypnotic.
Ah,
They're up in Vancouver.
good name.
Great people, a sister and brother team who really, really care about their work. They're not just
Oh,
there to rake in money in recording. They publish some books, but they're just doing the production of Octavo, and I just love them to death. So
Awesome.
I'll be talking more about them behind the scenes because they're doing some very groundbreaking things with Octavo.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio. Keep up with our shows at bigblendradio.com.